So in this video today, we will have a look at how you can issue a selective disclosure W3C verifiable credential using the walt.id API. But before we dive into how we can issue it, let's first understand what selective disclosure actually is. By default, it's a privacy-enhancing mechanism for verifiable credentials, allowing users to control what data to share in an interaction. This means that John, for example, who needs to prove his age, can just share his age with a verifier who can then verify that he's old enough to access a service, for example. But he doesn't need to share his name or his address or anything else that would be present in the credential that is not required by the verifier to provide the service. Okay, but now how do we actually achieve that? So in a regular credential, here how a bank ID, for example, looks like, all the data is in plain text. So if I would now share this data signed as a chart or SD-JWT, the verifier could just read all of that. But with a SD-JWT credential, what happens is we hide certain claims, for example, the family name, by hashing it. And so in an SD-JWT credential, all the claims which would be visible normal, like name John, are now just a hash. So the verifier can't actually do anything with it. Okay, so now we have a credential which has all this gibberish in it, but this doesn't give the verifier a way how to say that John is actually 21 years old. And for that, we need something called a disclosure. And a disclosure is basically the plain text value provided during the verification, which then the verifier can use to verify that the claim, the plain text claim, is actually also present in the credential. And this simply happens by taking the plain text value provided next to the SD-JWT credential with all the hashed claims, then hashing the claim text value with the same algorithm and hashing that. So here at the bottom you see that a disclosure is basically a salt, the attribute name, in this case name, plus the value, which is John, and then a salt, and that all of that is base 64 encoded and then again hashed with a function. And this then can be compared with the hash in the SD-JWT credential. And if it matches, the verifier knows, because the SD-JWT credential is signed, that the value is actually present in the SD-JWT credential. Next to just hashing the claims in the credential, the issuer can also add so-called dummy values. Because here in this example you see, okay, we have the normal credential and then we have the SD-JWT credential. And the normal credential has 2 claims, but the SD-JWT credential has 3 claims. Where the third claim is actually a dummy value, just to hide how many claims are actually in the credential. Okay, but now let's take all of that and apply it in real life and issue a SD-JWT credential to also understand a little bit more about the dynamics. So here I now have the Issuer API up and running. You can also click the link in the description to go directly to the setup guide so you know how to set it up yourself on your machine. And then I will go to credentials.walt.id and we will issue ourselves a bank ID. So I can just copy that over and take all this content, then go to the credential issuance section in the Issuer API and select the SD-JWT issue endpoint. And here in the body, I will provide my issuance key, my issuer DID. For more info regarding the key and the DID, please refer also to the documentation of the Issuer API. We will now focus specifically on the SD-JWT part. And here in the VC, so as a VC value, I will provide the value I just copied over. And then we have this selective disclosure object, where we can now specify which claims in the credential should be selectively disclosable by the user. So therefore hidden and hashed by default. And if we now take this and see that we have family name, given name, and birth date, so these 3 values here, enabled. And now next to the values, I also added decoy hashes. So I said, okay, I want to have 2 decoy hashes with the fixed mode, which basically says, okay, I only want to have 2, because there's also a random mode where it chooses some number from 0 to the number I provide as decoys. But we are using here fixed mode. So that is all selected, and I now execute it. And what I get back is this OpenID credential offer URL, which I can now copy. And let's go over to the wallet at walt.id. I already logged into my account, so I can now simply receive the credential by pasting in this credential offer right here. So that looks good. Bank ID to my DID key. So I accept it. And now we have issued an SD-JWT-VC. And if we open that up, we see right here that we have these 3 attributes, which are selectively disclosable. And if we view the credential in JSON, we can also see that here is the credential subject. So like here. But these 3 values are not visible, so you can't see them. And we also issued 3 selective disclosures. But here we have actually 5. So 2 of them are decoy hashes to conceal the actual number of claims that are in the credential. And now if I would present this to a verifier, I would send along the chart. So this one right here, which is the credential itself. So if you have a look, and paste this here, we have the header and then the payload, and here we have our credential in the payload. But here there's still these hashes, and therefore during the verification we need to send along the plain text values. And the plain text values we simply provide by adding to the normal chart these tilde signs, and then after each tilde sign providing the actual plain text value. And it doesn't seem like a plain text value, but if we would take this from this example here and paste it in, we see that this was a date of birth claim. So this can then the verifier use and compare with the values that are present in the credential to do the verification. And the great thing is we could, for example, just provide the age by just adding 1, or provide multiple always after a tilde sign. And now to do a quick verification and see how this actually would look like, let's go to our portal and here select the bank ID and then do a verification, and here that we can leave as is. Perfect. And I now open this and quickly need to log in. And now I can select the values that should be added to the chart. So the disclosures. And I say, okay, I just want to provide my names. So I accept that, and this is then shared with the verifier. The verifier now gets these 2 values, but doesn't get my birth date. And with that, you saw how you can issue SD-JWT-VCs using the walt.id Issuer API. I will link in the description below the guide to SD-JWT, so you can read up on all the different things and how the values are hashed, as well as the sections for the issuance and the section for the verification, so you can dive right in. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you want to see more content from walt.id, make sure to hit the subscribe button. With that, happy building and see you next time.